We are fortunate today to have Senator Mary Landrieu with us today, a voice, a leadership voice, not only for Louisiana, but across the country. But her real leadership started at the age of 23 in the state legislature when she stepped up to the plate and said, it's not enough to be a voice on the outside, I've got to be a leader on the inside. And you've been doing that a lot, not just on the big issues of the day, but also catastrophic issues around Katrina, around the oil spill in the Gulf and what's happened there. How do you feel the morning after last night's State of the Union?
Well, it takes me back when you say it was started at 23, and it feels like I've been fighting tigers, ever since. And many wonderful years in the legislature, and then as state treasurer, I actually focused on debt limits and fiscal responsibility. Right. So I feel like I've come full circle now fighting this federal deficit. And then, of course, we've had challenges, the hurricanes and the levee breaks. It wasn't just Hurricane Katrina, as you know, it was a failure of federal infrastructure. That's so right. When the president talked about infrastructure last night, I said you could be a Democrat or a Republican, but if you were in the flood that we were in, you would understand what and how important that infrastructure piece of building America's future is. We don't want bridges collapsing. We don't want levees breaking. We want roads and high-speed rail, and I hope that we can find some common ground when it comes to that and other issues.
Senator, you've been right at the heart of great moments when this country has come together around the levee failure and Katrina. Mm-hmm. And you saw your colleagues and political leaders rally to do what was right for people. You saw mistakes and you saw great moments. What out of those great moments can we take as lessons for our leaders, new leaders coming to Congress, for our citizens across the country? What can we take from those moments and make sure we keep moving forward? How do we find that greatness again and make it more of every day than an exceptional moment?
Well, that's a very interesting question, because actually there were some problems after Katrina where there was too much partisanship and too much blame game going around. And I think that really inhibited our initial acts for rebuilding. The money wasn't dispersed quickly enough. It wasn't dispersed fairly. There were all sorts of partisan bickering about whether we should build housing first or jobs or schools or all of the above. So I'm hoping to not use that as an example and use, maybe after 9/11 is a better example, mm-hmm. where the whole country kind of came together. At least temporarily. Now, again, some people would argue that that moment was, hijacked for a partisan and unprovoked attack in Iraq. So, you could analyze this to death. But I guess what I'm hoping is that people will just understand that the challenges have hardly ever been greater in terms of fiscal stability of this country, and that we would put aside our partisanship and really focus on delivering for the American people a smaller, more effective, but more entrepreneurial government. That government is important, but that it has a real partner in the private sector, thinking about using new technologies to streamline, to make delivery of services and other things the government has to provide more quickly. And I'm also very hopeful about the model of education. The model we've had for 100 years, centralized down, one provider and no provider, you take what we give you or you're out. People don't want that anymore. People are all about choices and options and sort of a custom fit. They're used to it, and the technology is giving it to them. What government's giving them is one size fits all, doesn't fit very well, can be actually sometimes downright uncomfortable. And so I think the NoLabels and the things that we're trying to do are saying, let's sort of drop the past, embrace the future, and I think we have a great opportunity.
Let's talk about activism for a minute, because right now you've got thousands of activists from across the country watching you, looking to leaders for guidance in terms of what can they do to help you to make the NoLabels culture more of the culture that you have to operate every day in instead of the traditional political environment. What can the activists do out there to help bring more of your colleagues to the table on these issues as opposed to people walking away in a political fight?
It's a very interesting question. I think they have to spend some time actually talking to people that are very representative of both ends of the political spectrum, both on the Democratic side and the Republican side, and really challenge them. What is so important about the Republican label, and what's so important about the Democratic label, and why can't you run as a Democrat, you run as a Republican. I can understand that. It's got to be some system. But once you get there, you should serve first as an American. Party labels should subside. And actually, philosophy or issues or approaches or methods should be more what we argue about. and not just hide behind labels to say, oh, well, I'm a Republican, I can't possibly think about, strengthening Social Security, or I'm a Democrat, I can't possibly think about private sector contracting in government employment. So I think, actually challenging members. Now, I'm very comfortable with the centrist label, so I guess maybe I'm asking them to do something that's easy for me, and harder for everybody else, because my people in Louisiana, whether they're African American or white or rich or poor, we're kind of that practical, common sense kind of politics. I mean, here's our money, spend it well, get the job done, kind of matter of fact kind of people. But maybe in some other states, people are just holding on to these labels that don't mean much.
You've seen a few States of the Union addresses,
Yes.
right? Did it feel different in the room last night?
It felt fine. I mean, it could have been a lot worse, considering the election. But I thought the president was very gracious to the new speaker. He acknowledged the change of leadership, and I think he rightly said, okay, now we're all leading. Both parties are leading, not just one.
Right.
Clearly, Democrats made some mistakes last time. But, I thought the Republicans Party was a little obstinate, not reaching out as far to the middle. But, we'll see what happens. But clearly last night there were Democrats and Republicans, and as sitting on each side.
Yep.
And as the president said, we could sit together tonight. Let's hope we work together tomorrow. So I'm very interested in what Mitch McConnell is going to say when Harry Reid says we want to bring X to the floor. I hope Mitch says yes and not no, because no is the language of yesterday, and yes is the language of today.
Well, let me ask you this. Senator Nelson joined us earlier this morning, and we talked a little bit about culture change and what it meant to be sitting next to one another and how that changes the air in the room. And what he'd like to do is really see a change on the Senate floor, so that people are sitting not by party caucus, but by any other means, alphabetical, seniority, delegation. What do you think of that?
That might be a step too far, but I want to remain open.
That's right.
I want to remain open to all
concepts.
all new ideas. I mean, that might be a little bit,
Not all your colleagues may be ready for that.
Yes, and I think that's been a long-standing tradition. But but I think we have to think about these traditions and whether they're serving the purpose of of serving the country and breaking down those barriers. I think, for instance, meeting once a month together as senators as opposed to every week in our individual caucuses could really help.
You're also known for being a leader of opening your home and your kitchen table, and you bring people to your home regularly to talk about issues and topics and sort of a real convener of conversation. I don't know that we see a lot of that happening.
No, we need to see more. And talking about kitchen tables, I've got to be at one lunch table in just a minute.
We'll get you there.
I'm going to sign off. But no, I think there's strategies that can be used. And I think last night was a good start. But we've got infrastructure to come together on. We've got education and reducing burdensome regulations. That is something that Democrats and Republicans can rally around. And, we don't want to eliminate engines on a plane. As the president said, it's smart. You can go too far with eliminating parts that you actually need. But we do need to think about building a new kind of jetliner for this century.
Thanks so much for being with us. Appreciate it.
Great.
Take care.
Thank you.
We're lucky to have Senator Landrieu here, somebody who leads conversations on a regular basis and can help move us forward. Thanks so much.